Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us in this Catholic Truth podcast, where we teach and preach the Catholic faith, which comes down to us from Jesus and the apostles. We are here to help you to know, love, and live your Catholic faith with purpose and passion. And we also want to help you to know yourself and to know God and to be transformed by the love of Jesus Christ, to find the peace, happiness, growth, and spiritual fulfillment that you are looking for. And sometimes on this podcast, sometimes here at Catholic Truth, we have guests with us to help us talk about these topics and to talk about many topics. I mean, we have a lot of great speakers in the Catholic world, a lot of people who have struggled, a lot of people who have had vast experience in life, who have gotten from point A to point B, and they're here to help us to do the same thing. And today I want to welcome to the show Hudson Biblo, who is from Canada, and he is a speaker, a Catholic speaker who travels around and gives conferences, and he speaks on the topics of human sexuality. And I'm very excited that he's here today. He is someone who has experienced same-sex attractions and transgender inclinations and has had a reversion to his Catholic faith and now lives fully for Jesus Christ and has been transformed by him. So welcome to the show, Hudson, and thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure to have you here. And, you have an extensive story that I heard about your same-sex attraction, about your transgender inclinations that you had. And you're someone who has given this story and talked about how you've come to Christ. And I would like to hear a little bit more about the life that you lived during these days, or how this all came to pass. A little bit about your early life and story.
Sure. I think I'm glad you asked, right? Because the big question, right, is people's like, well, if those are parts of your story, like, how on earth could you ever be Catholic? Like, doesn't the Catholic Church hate you? And it's like, well, I used to think that. And then God just provided opportunity after opportunity to realize that there was that was not the case. And actually, the Catholic Church is the best secret ever kept, and the place where I found the most profound degree of love and peace and joy that I've ever encountered in the world. And it's through encountering Jesus Christ through the sacraments and all that kind of stuff. But of course, how did I get here, right? So I guess I'll go back to the beginning. Like, from my earliest memories, I remember wanting to be a girl and experiencing transgender inclinations, as they would be called today. Back then, I was just pouring myself into thoughts of like the fantasies of being a girl and thinking I fit in as a girl. I didn't really feel like I fit in as a boy, even though I was included with boy things at the time often. There was just a distance between myself and other boys, and I remember that this distance created a longing in my heart, and it was interesting. It was a longing to belong with the boys, but also I began to idolize them more and more, saying I wanted to be like them. But there's this longing, and it came to a head one day. I remember. So transgender inclinations and the same-sex attractions, there's a lot of crossover for me, and because they are distinct, right? But this longing in my heart, which was really a longing to belong. I remember one day by about age 11 or so thinking like, well, maybe I'm supposed to belong with the boys as a girlfriend, because I didn't really see that I belonged with them as a boy, right? And there's all sorts of like factors about maybe like why I didn't perceive that I fit in that wolf pack and stuff like that. And I've explored those thoughts, if you can believe this. After one of the things that really got me thinking about these thoughts was after an LGBTQ activist actually told me to my face that environment plays a factor in the development of our attractions, right? So I'm in my mid-20s and this guy's telling me this. Of course, I'm wrestling with my feelings and my thoughts and my sense of belonging, my self-concept, my identity. And he tells me this. And so I go back into my life and I say, what are the things that happened in my life that made me feel the way I feel about things, And I'm sure there's nothing wrong with, exploration of our experiences, right? And because of this invitation from this activist of all people, because God can use anybody. It really helped me realize that there was a number of instances in my life growing up where there was a serious impact on my self-concept based on a certain thing that happened. Like, for example, feeling like I couldn't compete with the boys of my peers made me believe that I was second place, right? And my proper place was second place. And that lent itself to me idolizing those boys and made me feel that myself wasn't good enough. And so I didn't have the masculine confidence, and the masculine confidence, the lack of it, impacted the thirstiness I had for relationships where I would idolize the boys and and not see myself as good enough. And then also the desire to escape from the feeling of not being good enough. And that's kind of one of the big things that accelerated my thoughts down the transgender way, is because I entered into a spiral of escapism because I perceived myself to be rejected. I perceived myself as not good enough, and nobody wants to feel that way, especially a young child who isn't talking about this with anyone, because I just didn't. But
Would it be fair to say that you saw the boys, and you saw them as one thing and you kind of wanted that, but you weren't? And so maybe you couldn't
yeah,
identify as that?
yeah, exactly. And so, where was I here? The transgender. Oh yeah, so escapism. I'm going down the road of escapism, and I'm starting to escape into other things like pornography, which I was exposed to at age 9 by
Wow.
like a short little video clip on television, on daytime television, when I was 9 years old. Like, I mean, the adults wouldn't look at it as porn, but it was enough when I was 9 to blow me away. And I can still see that clip in my mind. I don't entertain it, but I can still see it. And so, of course, I wanted to escape into that pornography, and I felt ashamed for what I was doing because I knew that I was like doing something I shouldn't be doing. And not that sex was taught to be bad or anything. I just wasn't taught really much anything about that at the time. But I knew I was using people eventually. So I knew that I had a mounting shame for using people by pursuing pornography, which, by the way, at that age, in that era, amounted to looking through like the department store flyers and magazines. That's all a kid had, right? So you're looking for instances to get by yourself with that stuff.
But that was
I
the
bring
big
that up
stuff
because a
back
lot of people
then.
don't realize. Oh, that was the big stuff, and people don't realize this, that's all it could take for a little kid to go down these roads of escapism. So anyway, I went down. That brought me towards a lot of isolation, which did not help me develop healthy relationships with people. But the escapism and starting to feel bad about myself, and I lacked the self control in terms of managing my appetites, so to speak. And one of the ways of escapism that began was starting to, like, drinking and partying at age 13 and stuff, but then getting sexually active with girls in my mid-teens, trying to prove that I was straight. Straight. That's how I was thinking at the time. And but just going down the road of sexual pursuits as a means of escapism and a form of self-medication, because if I could get validation in that department, then it kind of distracted me from feelings of inadequacy, right? And so as I went down those roads, eventually, I actually discovered cross dressing in the mid-teens, and that was like a new type of high. And at first, it was just a curiosity, but then it really connected well with the previous desires of, like, being a girl. Well, maybe I really do fit as a girl because of all this is happening, and it feels good. And then I remember one day, just in desperation, sort of, mid cross dress, realizing that the tightness of the clothes was simulating like a hug, and I was really just doing it to receive that false hug, because I just felt so bad about myself, and I felt so low, and I had such low confidence, and was very sad and hurting inside from feeling rejected for so long. And I realized, like, wow, like this started out as like as a curiosity and a fantasy, and here I am now, just like doing it and receiving the self-medicating effect of being held. Isn't that something? so
Yeah.
so underneath, you think about like when someone's cross-dressed, like, eesh, like it totally medicated my anxieties. It just brought me in. And it's like, this isn't, at the same time, it's feeding me ideas that, like, well, this is who you're supposed to be. This is who you're supposed to be. And it doesn't help that by age 11, I was so bored of using the department store flyers for porn, that I remember looking at the page and saying, I'm gay. What else could an 11-year-old conclude when he's not turned on by the pages anymore because he's so bored of it? Porn is boring, right?
I've heard many men
Yeah.
actually become homosexual or of same-sex attraction just because they've looked at porn for so long. They don't feel attracted to women anymore. So they said, oh, well, maybe I'm not actually heterosexual. Maybe it's because I'm, struggle. Maybe I have a same-sex attraction. So they actually move over in that direction, but it has nothing to do with that at all.
Oh, totally. That was actually part of my experience too. Later down in my 20s, I remember being so exhausted from using porn, and then I moved to online porn, of course, because that just came onto the scene, and the porn addiction and porn compulsion became insane. But there was a point where I was like, well, none of this stuff is satisfying. Maybe I'm still questioning this gay thing. Maybe this is who I am. Maybe if I just go look at it, then at least I'll know, right? Wouldn't it be nice to just know, and then I can have this question answered? So I remember clicking on some gay porn, and I started watching a little of this, and I remember being like riveted, like disgusted, revolted, and riveted at the same time, but not looking away and wondering, how come I can't look away, right? It's kind of like when you're watching like an explosion, or a car falling off a cliff. You can't look away, and you're wondering, why do I want to look at this? And in that curiosity, and you're riveted, and you're saying, I think like, do I like this? What does this mean, right? I guess this means it's who I am, right? And actually, interestingly, there used to be a website called the Porn Effect, and that whole topic, because I had an article. I was blessed to be able to have an article published on that site, and it was called "How Porn Made Me Attracted to Other Guys," and the website's not up anymore. But that article got close to, this isn't about me. This is about how it must be resonating with people. It got 96,000 views in a very short time, and I'm like, okay, so there's other guys that must have this shared experience. And I have learned since that many guys have that experience, where they start with something here and then they drift, right? They drift. I mean, and anyone who's ever looked at online porn, don't go there, but there's categories all over the place. And that's so that people click in other areas. And it happened to be that that's the areas that I went to, but it's super common.
It makes sense. I mean, if we're using sexuality in a perverted way, in a way that God did not design or God did not intend, in a sense, anti-God, it's going to lead to anti-godly things as well, I would imagine, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, that compulsion and that self-medicating behavior, it just took me down spirals of isolation and shame. Oh my gosh. And the shame. So let me tell you, like, a lot of my life was about escapism, fear driven, being motivated by fear of being found out, like, especially not merely found out about, oh, I experienced same-sex attractions, or I'm wondering about this, or I'm wondering about transgender. Not about that. The fear of just of people knew that I had like little self-control, and that I was looking at these things. If people knew that, they would never want to love me, right? And I was already, I mean, I knew I was addicted to, like porn as I saw it by age 9. So, and so tendencies of an addict there's the tendency to believe that you're unlovable. And I embodied that. And so it was very hard for me to learn that I am lovable, and restored it by the blood of Christ, to understand that I am lovable and I am able to love. But the only way that I'll be able to love is if I'm loving through Jesus Christ first. But I didn't have that back then. I didn't understand that back then. And so in the fear of love, of being loved or loving, because of course letting people close to me would mean they would get to see me, and I did not want that. That fear kept me from becoming developing healthily with other people. So I didn't have, I didn't set things up well through my choices, because I'm complicit in this. I'm not, oh, I'm some victim, but I needed to grow in healthy, holy relationships. But because I was so mired in fear and shame and fear, I was less inclined to develop those healthy, holy relationships. So what happened as a result, I can see now looking back, is that I was so thirsty for those types of relationships that I would kind of throw myself into whatever I could in hopes that I would receive like validation or acceptance. But also because I didn't really have much for boundaries, I would cross boundaries, and so those weren't good either.
And I don't think it's
And
just
because I was crossing those boundaries, not go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, I don't think it's just you either. I think it's, not even just same-sex attraction. This goes across the board for heterosexual pornography and the feeling of shame, the feeling of fear and escapism. I mean, we often do it when we're feeling low, when we're hating ourselves, and then guys look at porn, they feel better for a couple of seconds, then they hate themselves even more. It's like this constant struggle of trying to break the end. And then if you're, of course, a Christian, you feel guilty, and you feel like God hates you and he's mad at you. And it's a whole cycle. It reminds me of, I don't know if you've seen Lord of the Rings, but
Yeah.
Gollum, he actually starts to become a good character, and he starts to become nice, and nobody ever thought he could. And then when does he revert and go back down into his old self? When he gets captured, the men beat him. They throw him into a little prison all by himself, and he's sitting there shivering. And all of a sudden, this voice comes to him and says, "Why do you cry?" And it says, "Because they're mean to us." And he's like, and so he promises them everything he had before, and he goes back to the evil because he was feeling so low and he didn't have the strength to fight. And I feel like that's a cycle many men, and nowadays many women as well, struggle with pornography and just or heterosexual or same-sex attraction.
That's the point, is that this experience of my story of negotiating my feelings and thoughts inside of the realm of same-sex attractions and transgender inclination, it actually enters the whole conversation that is experienced by everybody. And so not everybody, but like so many people, regardless of attractions experience or inclinations experience. And that's so true. It's like and especially the part about the healthy relationships is so key in my story, or in stories like mine, because I look back and I found out that I look back and see that I didn't have healthy, holy friendships. I had some good friends here and there, but healthy, holy friendships were something that were largely not part of the picture. Instead, I had friends through this or that, where we did stuff, or we had activities and stuff, but there was a surface level to it. But that deep, intimate friendship, which is pretty much lost on society today. I mean, when society is saying that Ernie and Bert are gay because there's no other way to categorize these characters, that tells me that society does not know what friendship is, right? And that you can Google search. There's even an article online about that where some guy says exactly that. I'm like, the world doesn't know friendship. Thankfully, before the days of the internet and before the days of entering into like ridiculous porn consumption, I did taste real friendship. I do know what that is like. So maybe that adds to the weight of feeling a real longing for it. But but because I was lacking that friendship, I would try to fill in the holes with other things. I try to fill like that need for holy relationship. It's like, well, if I don't know about friendship, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mistake a desire for closeness for to imply that I ought to act sexually romantically with somebody. And that's what's happening today, right? Now, and so because I tasted friendship a little bit when I was younger, I knew that my desire to be close with people did not imply that I ought to throw myself into them sexually or romantically. So I thank God that I was raised back then and not today, where that's kind of out of the picture right now. But that longing for friendship and all that was still there. And it took years for me to understand the meaning of holy friendship and to allow myself to grow in that ways. But the real start of that healing process, I gotta say, was I moved, and this was a healing not from gay to straight and not from trans to non-trans. This is a healing of my soul from feeling inadequate and not good enough and feeling unchosen and feeling shamed. This began to heal when I actually moved way up more north than I already am, into a small town where there was a group of Catholic men who actually radiated an interior peace. And I hadn't tasted that interior peace for as long as I could remember. And I was like, I want the peace that these guys have.
How did you find these men? Did you just run over them by accident? Like, how did you get to that group in the first place?
Sure. Well, I moved up to a small town for my very first year of my career. And so when you're in a very, very small northern town, there really wasn't much to do, but going to church was one of those options. And so I rolled into church, even though I wasn't really practicing. Like, this was kind of early on in my reversion. I was a cradle Catholic who had a reversion. So it was early on. I'm thinking, well, going to church is probably one of the best options I can do while I'm up here. And sure enough, I found these guys, and I'm like, what? Something is different about these guys. Like, they're like I said, the interior peace of Christ. And I was like, I need that peace because I didn't have that peace. And they sort of inspired me right from the beginning to just open my heart a little more to what the church had to offer and what Jesus is all about. And of course, I was a cheeky 20 something, and so I thought I knew everything there was to know about my faith, which is totally ridiculous.
And you were saying you were
but also
having...
real.
Oh, sorry. I was just trying to clarify something. Did you say you were already having a reversion at this time? Like, how did you get
reversion
from what you were living to where you are? Like, how did you get to start the reversion process?
God provided many little instances where I had to step back and say, something's not okay with where things are going. Well, I knew things weren't okay because I was like desperately going through relationships like crazy, like water. And I was like, this isn't okay. Like, what's going on? There's a few things. Oh boy. One, I had a class at a university where the professor, it was a Catholic studies class, and I learned that there's a lot of things I didn't know about the faith. So it kind of helped me give the faith a second look. I'm like, what's going on here? This is around 2005, 6, something like that. So I was about 26. And also around that time, this is kind of fun. I was riding in the car with my cousin, and a Taylor Swift song came on the radio. And back then, her songs were about breakups a lot of times. And so my cousin shouts at the radio jokingly. He's like, "Hey, Taylor, maybe it's you." And of course, we laughed. And then, but that night, I thought to myself, okay, we can, haha, Taylor, you're the reason why all these breakups are going on. Sorry, Taylor, if you're listening. Yeah, right. But I thought to myself, maybe all of these breakups that I'm going through, maybe I can't blame the girls for this. Maybe there's something inside me that I need to really look at. So that was like something I really had to consider. A second thing was right after Facebook began, somebody pointed out that most of the friends on my page were girls. And I thought, well, that's because I'm a ladies' man, so obviously I should have lots of girls on my page. But then I thought about it again, and I looked and I said, who are the guys on my page? First of all, they were right. But all the guys on my page, except for very few of them, all of the guys I knew them from before the time when I was sexually molested by a man. So that happened. I forgot to say that. I was molested by a man in my teens, right? And of course, that threw trust issues into the picture and that whole thing. But from that point on, like I was already having a difficult time relating to guys. Well, you throw trust issues after being sexually abused. I mean, and other people have experienced way worse abuse than me, so I acknowledge that. But still, you throw that in there, and it became very hard to relate to guys after that. Because even though I wanted to belong with guys still, and was wondering how I should belong, even as a girl, being a girl. But it was just even disastrous after that. So this happened, this Facebook thing, and I realized, okay, so I obviously struggle to relate to men if I haven't really made a single male friend, like a real friend, since the the day that happened. And so I'm like, okay, that's not okay, right? That's not okay. And another thing that happened is that I was at some kind of event and someone gave me a hug, and I went in for the hug because, a bro hug kind of thing. And I hadn't hugged anyone for a long, long time. And I realized that in this hug, I was like so uncomfortable in this, in public place, nothing weird, I was, going for the hug, and I just felt so like I didn't even know how to. It's like when the analogy I use is like when someone puts a dog on my lap, and I'm not a dog guy, so I'm like how do I hold this thing? I had that kind of discomfort, and I was like, even pre-conversion, I knew that it wasn't okay. Like that's not a healthy thing. I shouldn't be so terrified of people, and then just realizing that wow, I was living my life in fear, and I was like, this is not okay. This is not okay. So those things all helped me realize that the trajectory I was on was needed to be re-examined. And then, of course, shortly after that LGBTQ activist tells me that environment plays a factor in the development of our attractions. And I'm like, I can't let this go. I have to dig into this.
You had like a lot of revelations all at once, which is a grace in a sense. And that's amazing.
Yeah, I thank God for it. I thank God like and again, he uses everyone, like LGBTQ activists, Taylor Swift. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I actually relate to you a lot. Like I always felt a lot of shame. I felt lonely. I felt like I was nothing. I felt like a loser. I felt like I had no self-esteem. I was the ugliest person in the world. I was unlovable. I'd never get a girlfriend or get married. I was just the worst person in the world. Like that's what I struggled with for so long. And ironically, after many years of this, I finally found the key to self-esteem, and it was by watching the movie Ninja Turtles Part 2.
oh,
And he was tied up by the bad guy in the evil lair, and the evil guy comes up to him and starts growling in his face like, "Arr!" And the guy's like, he's like, "Oh man," he's like, "Dude," he's like, "if I had a face like yours, I'd try to make up with it with some sort of a personality." And it's supposed to be just a funny line, but I'm like, that's brilliant. I was like, yes.
yeah,
I was like, maybe I'm the ugliest person in the world, but I'm going to try to, offset that with my personality. I'm going to try to be nicer, kinder. Maybe girls will
yeah,
love me for who I am, even though I'm not anything. And that ended up making me reflect on, well, who am I? What do I have to offer the world? What, gifts and talents do I have? And I realized that I have a gift of making people happy. When people see me, they smile. I'm a good listener. I cheer people up. And that's all I focused on. And I ended up becoming one of the most popular people on my college campus. And I didn't do much except love others. And I eventually realized that I'm not the ugliest person in the world and all of that. But, it's amazing, just what thing might be used in this world to, to set your chain reaction of conversion off.
totally. And I totally hear what you're saying. And even the issue of like finding, like, how do you find your gift zone? How do you find your strength zone where you can shine the greatest for God, right? And so had I not run into those Catholic guys who inspired me to seek interior peace, I never would be able to get to where I am today, because it is only because of that interior peace based on the love of Christ that I experienced the joy of surrendering myself to the Lord, so that I can give of myself, in that way, and then just trust the Lord of how that's going to unfold, And by the way, right after that, when I met those guys, there was a priest up north too who actually preached about homosexuality from the pulpit. Catholic priest. So this is the first and pretty much almost the only time that I've heard it. And not that I'm saying it should be preached about often or anything, but the topic comes up, right? And but he insinuated that there was more to know, and that insinuation that there's more to know was enough to like send me into a road inspired with massive amounts of hope, right? It gave me so much hope that maybe I could learn something, and instead of just accept the worldly narrative that says this is who I am. So I met these guys, and then I met the priest, and all these things are happening at once, and it brought me to the state of learning that whatever I was experiencing today, the person I had become, largely to do with some of my choices to spiral into thoughts and how I respond to people, that no longer was my destiny. And so the worldly narrative was saying that your destiny is gay is who you are and who you forever will be, and trans is who you are and who you forever will be. And I'm like, I don't buy that. And I don't have to buy that. And I can move forward beyond this and actually not live in the despair of thinking that this is the best it's ever going to be. You're the gay kid. You got the bad deal. You're the trans kid. You got the bad deal. So you just got to deal with it. Because there's a lot of Catholics who believe that. They believe that, oh, God made you this way. And, this is, you're just denying it because this is who you are. And it's wrong of you. It's uncharitable for you to suggest to anyone that there's another way of like seeing yourself or considering, how you came to be, right? For the love of God, it was a gay activist who said environment plays a factor in the development of our attractions. And like when people like that say that stuff, I've said that 3 times already when we're talking, it was that impactful. And it was like, like so many things, like what impacts our neurological environment, right? Like desire, for example, by the way, sexual desire, sexual appetite is a subset of desire. Desires are governed by our brains, right? We have, of course, our sexual, faculties and stuff too. But appetites, sex drive comes from down there, but the particular appetites are formed in our brain. And it's like the coffee situation, right? I hate coffee. You're meeting a guy who hates coffee.
Me too.
And can you believe it? Yeah. But I love the smell of it. But when I was little, I chugged back a cold cup of coffee and I thought it was disgusting. I thought it was Coca-Cola, right? So I was shocked. I pounded it back, a bunch of grounds. But my particular appetite for coffee has been completely ruined. And so I'm like, well, I know that appetites can change based on experience. I know that appetites can be impacted by experience, just like that activist suggested. My environment involved pounding coffee. I know that my relational appetites were impacted by experience, my particular relationships. For example, after I was molested by that guy, I had no appetite to be around men that I didn't know. Like I still interiorly desired to belong with men, but my particular appetite to be close with men was gone. You know what I mean? And so there's just too much stuff. There's too much stuff happening in my life to accept this narrative that God made you this way. That's who you forever are going to be. It just doesn't make any sense. Plus the fact that as I turn my heart to the Lord, I have had healthy, holy, opposite sex attractions like come up, and I experienced some of those attractions when I was little. So it's like there's more. You know what I mean? There's more to the picture, and part of that includes the reality that wherever we are today, that if that doesn't destine you to stay in that box forever. So to hell with the box.
Amen.
Really, to hell with the box.
Literally.
Yeah.
And I heard a statistic saying 1/4 of all lesbians had actually been sexually abused, and they wanted nothing to do with men because of that. So they were like, well, I don't want men, so maybe I want women. Maybe that's, it's kind of the pornography thing we were talking about. It's not that you do, it's just something has happened to you to change your appetite, to change your desires.
You know what breaks my heart the most is that because the narrative is so strong in our society that says this is who you are, that so many people have had experiences like that, guys and girls, and there's no one able to think about helping them because they're so convinced on saying this is who you are. You know what I mean? And so it's just there's, I don't mean like help to become straight. I mean to like talk about it. The conversations that people need to have about why we feel the way we do and what's underneath that. Again, as suggested by that LGBTQ activist, those conversations are less likely to occur because people are so invested these days on trying to say God made you this way.
Exactly.
It's very sad.
And he didn't. So if you're someone out there who thinks God made you that way, he didn't. And you can message us.
You know what? I got to tell you a crazy story. This was a story from a friend who told me. So I talk about friendship. Speaking of God making us this way, he's in his 60s, and he says he always was told to believe that because he felt the way he did, it meant that he was gay. And in his 60s, he says, you know what I was really looking for? I can see it now. All I was looking for was friendship. So he had a longing for friendship, and the world had taught him to interpret that to mean he was gay. And it burned up so many years of his life in that road. So you want to talk about tragedy? Beautiful man, beautiful heart. And and his life was consumed by the lie that this means this is who you are.
Right.
Oh, like
Yeah, I remember at Steubenville, I went to Franciscan University and I found like really deep friendships there. I mean, especially our household, which is like a Christian fraternity. We were all 32 guys. We were like so close. You'd often go into the common room and you'd see the guys like laying on each other, like heads on shoulders, arms around each other. You'd totally think like this is like a gay fraternity. Like, but we were all just so close and we all had such close friendships that we could have it in a healthy way. Now, normally women have that. They can touch, they can, put their arms around each other. They hold hands and, 99% of the time it has nothing to do with same-sex attraction at all. It's just friendship, and it's a deep friendship. And I experienced many guys who had that, and most of those guys are married today, and me being one of them. But I mean, what we need today is healthy friendships, and we don't have that. We don't understand. I mean, okay. There's just so many problems on so many levels. We don't have an understanding of love. We don't have an understanding of identity. We don't have an understanding of relationship, friendship, so many things down the line. And I've been a Catholic speaker for 20 years. And it wasn't until about maybe probably 25 years I've been speaking, but probably about 15 years ago, I'd say 10 years ago, maybe, I discovered Pope John Paul's Theology of the Body and Pope John Paul II's Love and Responsibility. And I couldn't understand them at that time because they were a little bit philosophical in nature, but one of my friends helped me work through the language barrier, and I started to take it page by page. And I went to a study group and I was speaking on love and relationships, teaching people to have good relationships. I was speaking on chastity and marriage and how to, have a good, healthy, loving relationship. And then I read these books and realized I have no idea what love is. I mean, sure, on this level I do, but this is like up here.
mhm.
It's like, wow, it would literally transformed not only my concept of love, but my concept of life, humanity, dignity, like you said, labels and who we are, our identity, that we're not the labels that society gives us. And it literally transformed everything from the head to the toe, from love to sexuality and everything in between. It's a bomb of beauty. It's a bomb of truth.
It totally is. And you know what? That theology of the body, I forgot to say, that was also part of it. I heard a 10 CD talk from Christopher West around
Yeah,
2007.
me
And I was
too.
like, what? I never thought of sexuality as a gift before. I never thought of any of those concepts before. And there was so much freedom. There was so much like hope for something better. You know what I mean? Like, oh my gosh, like God has a plan for me and it's good. Are you crazy? Like, I never thought, I mean, you hear about the things when you're little, but like not when you're a despairing adult who's been like believed to fit in this box, right? It's like you missed the ticket there. But it was just life changing. Exactly. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I love it. I have a whole bookshelf now of all Pope John Paul II books, Love and Responsibility and such. So, I mean, if there's anyone out there and you want to be transformed and you're struggling in relationships, you're struggling with sexuality, you're struggling with pornography, there are so many books out there to help you. I mean, Jason Everett alone has a 5 CD set called Pure of Heart. And it's 5 CDs teaching you how to overcome pornography. Matt Fradd has one called The Pornography Myth. Um,
Super
there's
good
other
stuff.
books on, huh?
It's super good stuff. All that
Yeah.
stuff is,
So
yeah.
I recommend people, please check out these books, check out these resources, because they're all out there to help transform your life. You don't have to be alone. And I like what you said, Hudson, about, our label. I remember once Jason Everett said, and I think you have even said the same thing in one of your talks, that if the culture tells you you're gay and you accept that, you live one way. You live like a gay lifestyle, so to speak. But if you accept the truth that you are a child of God first, and that's who you are, you're going to live a whole different way, right?
Well, that points to, yeah, exactly, but it points to the reality that self-concept and mindset truly matters. And that points to the importance of how the formation of self-concept and mindset needs to be a number one priority, because quite frankly, the world is doing a better job at forming mindsets than the church is. Okay, what do I mean the church? Than the people of the church are. We're responding to things. Oh, the kids are maybe 10 or 12 years old or early enough to learn topic X, but they've been soaking it in the world from age 3.
That's right.
So it's like we're so behind the 8 ball, but it doesn't need to be that way. If if we become very intentional in how we live our lives as Catholics, like if it's, network with other Catholic people so that, we can raise children in ways they can see other Catholic mentorship instead of wanting to dive into the internet and wanting to dive into the TV and movies and stuff like that. There'll be something better, maybe real relationships with other kids and other families that are fulfilling. Because back in the day, that's what we did. We actually had real face-to-face relationships. That's what humans did before the iPhone. Sorry, I don't want to get sued by Apple. The smartphone generation. You know what I'm saying? So that's what we need. I think that would be a really great thing. And you brought something up I just love. You say, like, you had your buddies and you would hug and it'd be physical touch. We're missing holy touch. Our whole culture is missing holy touch. So I think that's accenting the problem of sexual exploration among young people, because they're so desperate to experience like affection, that when somebody gets close, because we have such a hands-off society, when somebody gets close, it's all the more rare of an occurrence, and therefore all the more weight is put into it. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, this is just a generalization, but think of it this way: like, if you feel like you're not really being chosen, or you're being neglected, or maybe you're feeling very isolated, especially in a smartphone generation, and somebody gives you a little bit of attention, that attention can mean a lot. And it could draw a person into some conclusions, like maybe they really like me, or maybe there's an attachment right away, and this attachment is coached to, people are coached to believe that these attachments, which would otherwise be related to maybe developing in friendship, but they ought to be romanticized or sexualized, right? So, like, the impact of a lack of healthy, holy touch in our society, is, I think, it's a little far more reaching than what people think it is. The other thing I want to talk about real quick is chastity, because in the Theology of the Body, I learned about chastity. And
it's not having sex, right? No sex.
It's not that. It's not. It's like, oh yeah, it's like a person can be not have sex and be unchaste, and a person can be chaste and have sex. So that people really need to explore those terms, because
before you explain it, I talk to people all the time in Catholic circles who say, like, you're allowed to lust over your spouse, right? Like, once you're married, you can lust. I'm like, no, lust is always and forever an evil that's contrary to love. And they don't understand that chastity is required even in marriage. So people don't understand, what chastity is. So I'm glad you're bringing this up.
Oh man, it is so misunderstood. And but it's where the freedom is at. So it makes perfect sense why the whole culture wants people to not know about chastity. In fact, there's lots of people who who I've learned, unfortunately, there's a lot of Catholics who just don't want to point people to the church's understanding of chastity, because they don't believe the authority of the church to define the word, first of all, and that's a whole other topic. But anyway, the gift of chastity. Okay, I learned about chastity in Theology of the Body. Like, what is it? To distinguish it. First, I had to distinguish it from abstinence and celibacy. So if I was to just make the quick distinction, I could say, like, chastity is a matter of the heart. Like, you can choose chastity in your heart long before you make an action. You can choose unchastity, or the rejection of chastity, in your heart long before an action. So some people think you can only be unchaste if you're in the act. It's like, no. It starts up here long before the act. Yep. So that's the thing. So it starts here and here. So chastity,
just to be clear, abstinence is not having sex. That's what priests do. They're abstinent. They're not.
Yeah. Yes. Well, abstinence is not. Abstinence is not doing. So you're abstaining from doing something, and then celibacy is the state in life. So let's say a priest is in a celibate state, and they are abstaining from sex, and hopefully they are also chaste, because there is such a thing. There is such a thing as unchaste celibacy. And I mean, priest or not. So you have a single person in a single state, like myself. I'm living in a celibate state, unmarried. I am abstaining from sex, but I'm striving to do it in a chaste way because I love God, not because I am trying to, like, lust after every person that walks by, and I'm just white knuckling saying I have to behave because I want to be a good Catholic.
Right.
So, but there are people who think that way, and the resentment seeps through all that they're doing, and that's not okay. And I can't judge someone's resentment, but I can say, like, if you're lacking joy, there's a chance that there might be some resentment, because joy is an enemy of resentment,
Well, it
right?
just means you need more conversion. God still needs to work on your heart more and, bring, in a sense, like draw out that poison of lust.
Yes, exactly. And so chastity, I learned about chastity, learned that it was distinct from abstinence and celibacy, and realized that it began with me. And that this turned the tables on everything, because I thought that the church was rejecting me, and the church was rejecting me. It was starting to like warm up to the idea that that might not be true. And then I realized, for as long as I was rejecting chastity, it was me rejecting the church. And I was like, this changes everything, because suddenly the church isn't the big bad guy anymore, and I can't play victim. I have to take responsibility and say that I'm the one who is rejecting the proposal of the church. And that's the other thing. Chastity, I had to learn that chastity, it's not an imposition. There's lots of people who think it's an imposition. It's actually a proposition. And the reason why this is so important, because we're having things like what do you call those conversion therapy bylaws and stuff that are passing all over the place in the world. And there are some people in the conversation, I've been on these conversations, where they're interpreting chastity as an imposition, and the imposition of chastity should be against the law, which is there's problems in that statement. The idea of presenting another idea as being against the law, but also the idea that they believe that chastity is imposed. But because it's a matter of heart, and nobody can override your free will or anyone's free will, nobody can impose chastity. It's not possible to be imposed. It can be recklessly proposed, but it can't be imposed unless someone can overrule the free will on your heart. So I think it's an important nuance for people to understand and to include when they're talking about it, the proposal of chastity, so that it doesn't get mistaken to be an imposition. Now, we can impose abstinence, right? Like I can move two people apart, but I can't impose chastity. That starts right here.
But chastity isn't even from the church either. You said you rejected the church, which is true, but through that, you actually reject God, because true sexuality, purity, which is really what we seek, purity as opposed to lust, comes from God. I mean, lust and love are always opposites, because lust seeks to take, it seeks to gratify oneself, even at the expense of another person. Even if you have to sacrifice the other person, you just want the pleasure for yourself, whereas love seeks to give, even if it's a sacrifice for yourself. And that's why it's interesting that you said, Theology of the Body presents love as a gift, because you give love and someone else gives love to you. And in theory, marriage is two people giving 100% of each, sacrificing themselves for each other out of love, the same way God sacrificed himself 100% out of love for us on the cross, and just gave himself unabashedly, unreservedly gave himself to us, and still does, even when we, give him the finger, and even when we spit at him, and even when we hate him, he still just loves. It's just it's a crazy kind of love. And we're called to love in that same way. And anytime we choose lust, all of a sudden we've reverted that around. It's becoming selfish. Love is selfless, lust is selfish.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And to add to that, because chastity is rooted in love. We think what really worked for me to tip me to move it beyond philosophy or theology and move it into like a real encounter. It like it just became more real. Was that the idea of understanding it as a gift? When you give a gift that matters, you will experience a greater degree of joy giving the gift, right? So giving a useless gift is meaningless. So it was like, my sexuality is a very beautiful and important gift from God. So if I give that gift to God, like that I have to trust that the Lord will reward that I'll experience a greater degree of joy of giving that very beautiful gift to God, as opposed to just giving compared to another gift that is like I joke about giving away like my favorite type of potato chips, right? I feel joy in giving you something I like, right? But my sexuality is more valuable than a potato chip. You know what I mean? And so, like, clearly, I'm going to experience more joy. But when I took that leap of faith, because I didn't taste the joy till I took the leap of faith to pursue chastity in my heart, and after I did, I'm like, there's no looking back. It's like I will strive for chastity for the rest of my life, because that is where the joy is. That's where the freedom is, the peace, all that
And
stuff.
people who don't live chastity yet, and they're struggling with lust, and they're struggling with a fight, and they feel like they're losing something every time they try to live chastely, it's like they don't understand that it's like after you get to the mountain top, you see this mountaintop view, and it chastity literally frees you from this war inside you, this raging war of, I hate myself. I failed again. I can't stand this. I know this is wrong. I want what's right, but I can't do what's right. So I'm just a horrible person. Once you get chastity and actually transforms you, I mean, chastity literally transforms you. So it is a struggle. It takes a while, but once you even start getting there, it frees you. And all of a sudden you have this huge area within you, this wellspring that allows you to love freely, innocently, purely, without selfish motives, to give yourself as a sacrifice and to understand what that means. And it's just, not to say that you're never going to not struggle with it ever again, because we still struggle with it. But when you're mostly freed from it, it's just beautiful. And for all the single people out there, I heard Mary Beth Bonacci say, chastity outside of marriage is the freedom to dump losers. And it actually protects you from finding false kind of loves and from being hurt. And she always goes out to dinner, and she has these guys who always want to take her out. And so she says yes. And they ask her, "Oh, what do you do?" She says, "Oh, I'm a chastity speaker. I speak to, thousands of teens each year and tell them, how to wait to have how to wait till marriage to have sex." And then they're like, "Check, please." Basically they wanted her for one thing. They knew they weren't going to get it, so they weren't interested in anymore. She said chastity, which is basically self-control and choosing something higher and better, which is love, is protecting them. And Jason Everett says that same thing, something I like too. He said, chastity is not a no, you can't have sex. It's a yes, I can have sex at the right time, with the right person, in the right way, and for the right reason, which is love and marriage, and giving myself to them and they give themselves to me forever, soulmates. And so you're just saving yourself for something better. If we always present it like, oh, you can't have it because it's bad and evil, yeah, you're going to struggle. But if you retransform your mind, like Pope John Paul II helps you to do, you realize that, oh, it's not a no, it's a yes. I want the better.
Totally. And and in that, I like how you kind of brought in the nuance of striving, because before I realized that this was about striving to live chastely, I held myself to this impossible standard. I had to behave perfect, and no one's going to behave perfect. So if you have that as your standard, you're always going to feel like you never measure up, and you're going to get down in your failures. So the idea of striving for chastity is perfect, because no matter what decision I can start right now. I can start to strive again. And so if I have fallen from grace, I can, repent and go to confession and have a good confession and start again. And the repentance can start immediately, even before your confession. And so it always puts us one step away from the win all the time, no matter where we are. Yeah. And the win is to turn back to Christ. Our fidelity to Christ is the evidence of the win in Christ, And and
you're not a failure if you fall. You're on a journey. And yes. I think that's the biggest thing that people need to learn. We actually made a video on this channel, if anyone's interested, on 10 ways to overcome lust and pornography and how to overcome that addiction. And one of the things is not to beat yourself up when you fail. That's the worst thing to do, because God's on your side. He's in the mud with you. He's helping you to grow stronger each time. And I give the example of this guy, Joe, that I knew, and he did drugs every day. And he came to me for counseling, even though I'm not a counselor, but I counsel a lot of people. And he came to me one week and he was so depressed. And I said, Joe, what's wrong? He's like, I did it again. I was like, what did you do again? He's like, drugs. He's like, I'm a horrible person. I'm like, okay, how many times did you do it this week? He's like, 3 times. I'm sorry. I'm like, I said, great job. He picked his head up. He's like, what? I said, great job. He's like, great job that I did drugs. I said, no, great job that you only did it 3 times instead of 7. You're making progress. Good job. He's like, oh, like whole different mind change. It's like we get down that we're just always bad rather than we're making progress. And that's the devil's tool to keep us down, isn't it?
Totally. It totally is. Totally is. One of the fruits of this progress, by the way, I got to tell you. So chastity, self-control, and that was connected to me with confidence, because a lot of my shame was to do with I didn't have the self-control, and so and other reasons that my masculine confidence was through the floor. But it was like once I realized that I could, by the grace of God, cooperate with Him and have better self-control, I was like, maybe I'm not such a bad guy after all. This is the short story here, right? And so my confidence rose. And what that did is allowed me to not be so fearful of other people, including being fearful of being around guys again. So my masculine confidence was rising, and I was like, oh, maybe I could put myself around, and I wouldn't feel so ashamed, right? And through that, I there was two after effects that happened. So one was that same-sex attractions for me, actually, there's same-sex sexual attractions, those diminished as my love for pursuing chastity increased. So as chastity increased, the lustful pursuits for me diminished. So same-sex sexual attractions diminished for me. I'm not going to say they just vanished. I'm not going to say, there's thoughts and stuff that come by here and there, but big deal, right? They don't control me. I don't really care about them. But there's also same-sex romantic attractions, and that would be like the longing in my heart to spend that time with those boys and wonder about romance. But really, I realized that as I gained my confidence in my masculinity, I didn't see the other guys as having what I lacked as much. That diminished. And then I noticed after time, I'm like, wait a second, like I don't feel romantically attracted to guys either anymore. So that diminished. So same-sex sexual attractions and same-sex romantic attractions both diminished as an after effect, as an unintended after effect of pursuing a heart of chastity. That was wild. I didn't expect it. And that's an important thing to note, that it's an after effect and it's unintended, because there's some people that think that the church is trying to change people from gay to straight. It's not. The church just wants people to pursue holiness. And for some people, the attractions will diminish, and for some people, they'll just go away. But for some people, it doesn't. And it's important for us to be okay with that. Like for me, like I said, like, I wonder about those thoughts here and there, and but I know that those thoughts and those feelings in and of themselves don't exclude me from holy marriage to an opposite sex spouse. They don't exclude me from religious life. A mere attraction does not do that, right? It doesn't exclude me from holy vocation. And there's a lot of Catholics, and unfortunately, who believe that because a person experiences same-sex attraction, it means that they're destined to be forever excluded from holy marriage to an opposite-sex spouse if they desire it. It's like, you can't have that. It's like, that is a lie.
Well,
You
there's
can't have it.
heterosexuals too.
Yeah, that's right. If you're pursuing a holy relationship, maybe a holy spousal relationship could be a part of that picture. But holiness is going to include chastity, and chastity includes successful integration of our sexuality. This was important for me to put the words to, is that successful integration of our sexuality includes recognizing that God wrote you into existence as a male or a female. So a transgender mindset is counter to chastity, without a person really maybe understanding that they're rejecting chastity, but it's counter to chastity. But so too is the idea that your physiological complement is a person of the same sex. It's because you're rejecting how God wrote our sexual faculties to work together as male and female. And so those are rejections of chastity. And as long as I thought that, being gay is who I am, and I ought to pursue a romantic or sexual pursuit with a person of the same sex, or as long as I thought that transgender is who I am and this is what I need to do, I was actually countering chastity. And of course, I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't have the words to describe it, but given that I desire to grow in chastity because I've tasted the joy of it, and I know that the fruit of that is holy relationship. I know that I don't have to stay dwelling in the reality, the sorrowful reality and despairing reality that being gay or being trans is who I am. And like, I did self-identify as that way for some time. Okay, like I did. I know what it's like to be in there and thinking that this is it, right? I have to, just live in that forever. Forget it. Chastity has freed me to walk away from that, and it's beautiful to know that it's the experience of many other people too. They're pursuing the Lord and they realize that they can walk out of that. But what is also sad is that there's a lot of people, Catholics in particular, who believe that that we shouldn't be doing that. We should just stay in those boxes. And it just
really
is what it
sad.
is. But yeah, it's very sad. But it's kind of like, do I just dust my sandals off and try to live joyfully for people who are opening?
A lot of those people
that's what I got to do.
A lot of those people who just choose to live that style are very broken too, like you are. And I think you put it perfectly. I think it all comes back down to human relationships. Like we all need that touch. We all need someone to touch us on the arm, stroke our face, tell us we're good, tell us we're okay, tell us that we're lovable and that sort of thing. We need someone to hug us. We need someone to, tell us that at our core being, even if we're a failure, we're still good because we're children of God and have an infinite worth and dignity. And so many people don't have that today, and they're lied to. It's like a broken record in their head. You're lied to, you're horrible, you're horrible. And so it's easy to stay and justify that lifestyle because that's who I am, rather than being freed from that through holy relationships, which everybody needs, holy friendships, as you keep saying.
And we have to be honest, the fact that inside some of these same-sex relationships, people get that sense of, I feel like I belong here, and I feel special, and I feel chosen.
Mm,
And those are very compelling and powerful reasons to not leave that place. And so
yeah.
I have to acknowledge that. And for some people, it's even brought them some degrees of stability that they didn't have before. And so it's a very, it's a powerful sort of situation to walk around, right? And of course, we want people to just come to know Jesus Christ. And if everybody came to know Jesus Christ, everybody would learn to love better, right? And every relationship would be enhanced. And I think of the guy from the Desire of the Everlasting Hills. His name's Paul. In that movie, right? And so he talks about how he basically encountered Christ through the way God did it through, that nun on the EWTN. I forget her name. Um,
Mother Angelica.
yeah. And he just encountered Jesus through that whole thing, and he learned how to love better, and he was able to talk to his partner, his same sex partner, and say, basically like, I want to love better. I want to, turn to Jesus, and I don't think we can be physically together anymore. And then having a partner that was okay with that, because he was recognizing that Paul was able to love more, love better, love more profoundly because of the love of Jesus, right? It's just, I mean, obviously it's his story, and I'm just bringing it real small together, but it's so profound. Like, Jesus's love helps us love better. That's what we want for
Yeah,
everybody.
absolutely. And that means doing it his way, following his path, So even if a relationship, heterosexual or homosexual, makes you feel good and feel love, but it's not of God because it's sex outside of marriage, or it's a relationship that God doesn't approve of, it can't possibly be to where it can't possibly where God wants you. In some way you're putting a block between you and God. Like, if we're having sex outside of marriage, we're seriously, it's a mortal sin, first of all, but we're blocking our relationship with God. Whereas if we free ourselves from that for a higher form of love, meaning we put God first, do it his way. I mean, what does the Bible say? If you love me, God, if you love God, then you will follow his commandments. And once you follow God, he frees you to love so much more. I mean, that's so true. I mean, even in my own relationships, I've been able to love so much more because of God. But when I'm in my sins and when I'm in myself, I don't love as well. I'm more impatient. I'm more unkind. I'm more inclined to do things that I don't want to. And, you say, some of those things never go away, but it's a struggle. They don't define who we are.
Right.
Husbands or wives may look at, don't suddenly not become attracted to people once they're married. They're still attracted to people. And some people let that attraction, they just look at everyone. They window shop and say, I'm allowed to. Other people say, I'm tempted to, but I'm not going to because I'm choosing a higher form of love, which is loving my wife and sacrificing all other women for her. So I may even notice that a woman's beautiful, but I'm not going to dwell on it. I'm not going to just let my mind go with that because I want to love my wife and, not be led astray. So, not that, and that's a good distinction, because looking at other women or other men is not necessarily a bad thing. Noticing their beauty or their strength
Right.
or their goodness is not a bad thing. It reflects God and his beauty and strength and goodness. But if we do it in a way that's not appropriate, that's when it can become bad.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess it really comes down to seeing is like, who, if we know who we are, then we have a better chance of knowing our purpose and being able to see which is to love, and seeing ourselves through the lens of being God's beloved, adopted children. And first and foremost, and understanding that loving through Jesus Christ will not only like be better for those around us, but also better for us. It really shapes our responses to things. Self-concept shapes responses, and that being able to surrender ourselves, including our identities and mindsets, to the Lord and to the authority like of God, and especially and actually truly for me too is like understanding like as found through the Catholic Church and the wisdom found in the Church. That's where the freedom has come, and that's helped me. Has helped me get to where I am today, right? And I mean, like I'm. It's like I'm not a finished work, but I'm way better place than I've ever been. I say the best I've ever been. And again, like I said, once you unlock the beauty and riches of the faith and understand that the faith is on our side so that we can live beautiful, joyful lives. I mean, there's really no looking back. It's not a control mechanism. It's not, just white knuckle your way through life. It's not. It's so much more. It's so much more beautiful.
It's funny that you say that because everyone says, the Catholic Church hates gays. The Catholic Church is against transgender. When in reality, so many homosexuals in the church have said they've never felt better. They've never felt more free, more happy because they found Jesus and they found the truth that sets them free. And that's so interesting. And if anyone's struggling with same sex attraction or transgender or anything else like that, there are resources out there for you. Courage is an online ministry that helps people who have struggled with this. And it's kind of like, it's not exactly like AA, but it's more of just a place where you can meet other like-minded people who can relate to you, understand you, help you through it, and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Um,
they would say they're a spiritual support group for those who desire to follow the teachings of the church or the truths upheld by the church.
and so many people have been helped by Courage. So if that's something you struggle with, please check that out. Also, check out the video "The Third Way," which is people who had same-sex attraction who found freedom and healing through God and the Catholic Church, and also the what did you say? The hills,
The desire of the everlasting hills.
the desire of the everlasting hills is another one. All these will help people struggling with same-sex attraction to realize you're not alone, to realize there is help and there are other
Yeah.
people out there in the same boat as you, and all across the board, not just same-sex attraction, but heterosexual loves has been destroyed like an atomic bomb, just obliterated. Our world is so confused about love, self-esteem, identity. So please
Mm.
check out our love and relationships folder on this channel too. If you struggle with self-esteem, self-identity, check out our video on how I found self-esteem. And I talk a lot about the beginnings of theology of the body and how God made us and who we're made to be. And once you accept that identity, it changes the rest of the way you think and live. And
Yeah, yeah.
go ahead.
Except it's a mindset. It's a mindset shifter. And I'm wondering if I can add one more thing to the
Yes,
beautiful resources you're sharing.
please.
So one thing, it's interesting. If you type in detransitioner into the computer, you'll get the red wiggly line underneath it. The term detransitioner is not even recognized by our culture as a word, yet there's story after story of detransitioners that are just flooding the internet right now. I remember trying to keep track, and there was so many coming
What
out.
do you mean by that, detransitioners?
People who transitioned, they've transitioned sometimes medically of transgenderism, and then they've said this was a very bad idea, and they've returned to the sex that they were born as. So these detransitioner stories will help shed light on many angles of this, many of these angles, including the encounter with God's love and basically a restoration of the sense that God did not make a mistake. God loves me
Amen.
as who I am, and I can flourish and thrive in the sex that God made me. Just YouTube detransitioner stories. There's so many,
So
so
many.
important.
They have whole websites of them now. People who thought they were a man, thought they were a woman, and realized later on that they weren't. And sometimes people converted 2, 3, 4 times. They bounced back and forth and then realized, like, what am I doing? And so they tell their real life, honest stories of being confused, of being broken, of what led to this and how they came back to the truth. So this is the bomb of truth that you won't hear in our culture, but that truth that sets you free. And that's what we do here. We preach the Catholic truth. And so I want to tell you and all to check out our videos and thank you all for watching today. I want to thank in a special way Hudson Biblo for joining us and sharing your wisdom and sharing your journey with us. Thank you so much.
It's been a total pleasure. Thanks, Brian.
And thank you all for tuning in. I would love to have Hudson back sometime to, talk more about transgender in a deeper way or, understanding our culture. But, I would ask that you all help us to get this video out there. I'm just going to say right away that this will not be monetized. So, because YouTube won't do that. And so if you could support our ministry and consider supporting us because we make these, even though we know we're not going to get monetized because it's not about making money. It's about getting the truth out there that people desperately and direly need. So if you could help us in our ministry, please consider supporting our ministry on Patreon or PayPal down below. Please also consider following us on our Facebook, Instagram, check out our podcast, our YouTube channel, and consider sharing this with other people. Put a comment down below. Liking the video, commenting, and sharing all help make this video more popular and even help more people to see it, because YouTube's already going to try to keep people from seeing it, because we have to say that there's controversial issues in here. So it's already not going to be seen by more people. So if you could help us liking, sharing, and commenting, you will help to get the truth out there that will set people free. So thank you, Hudson, and thank you all for watching this. May God bless you all. Please pray for us. We are always praying for you.